What if the military's most legendary ghost pilot wasn't a myth, but a test? When Ember Raine, call sign Specter-One, violates restricted airspace in a retrofitted Soviet jet, she forces the Air Force's top fighters into a deadly evaluation. But the real threat isn't her, it's what's watching from above. Because something built to kill has started to remember, and it doesn't want war. It wants answers. Welcome to my channel. You ever fly so high the silence makes your bones ring? It's not just the lack of sound. It's the absence of permission. That moment when you know you've crossed into a space not meant for ordinary people. My name's Ember Raine, and I was never interested in ordinary. It was a Wednesday morning over the sun-baked flats outside Wichita, Kansas, the kind of place where the sky stretches wider than most people's courage. At 25,000 feet, in a modified Yak 130, stripped, silent, and engineered beyond its Cold War bones, I crossed into restricted airspace. No flight plan. No transponder. No clearance. I didn't need any. Down below, in the polished corridors of Air Control Command, I knew alarms were screaming. Threat indicators. Radar sweeps. Protocols stacking up like dominoes. And somewhere in one of those towers, some young officer was barking into a radio. Unidentified bogey at 25,000. Scramble intercept. That's exactly what I wanted. Because this wasn't a stunt. It was a test. Not of me. Of them. They sent two F-15 E-times from the 422nd Test and Evaluation Squadron. Brand new birds, shiny with confidence and crammed with digital toys. I caught their approach vectors on my secondary display, less a HUD than a relic cobbled together with custom-coded overlays. My bird was analog at its core. But she could still see. I gave a slight nudge to the throttle, holding steady, clean, and casual. The cockpit around me was humming, not from stress, but from the kind of old, beautiful tension that comes when you know what's coming and welcome it like an old friend. My call sign isn't on any flight board. Wasn't even on my old uniform. But it's the kind that still circulates like ghost stories and night flight briefings. Specter-One. And until that moment, most of these kids thought I was just a rumor. The intercept came in fast, sharp delta vectors closing from my port and rear. Standard playbook stuff. I watched them maneuver into textbook positions, like watching chess pieces on a board I helped design. Then came the radio. Unidentified aircraft. This is Eagle Flight Leader of the 422nd. You have entered restricted airspace without authorization. Identify yourself immediately and alter course. Textbook tone. Clean, crisp, like it came from a simulator. I didn't answer. I never do. 30 seconds later, the tone changed. This is your final warning. Respond immediately or be classified as a hostile. In my thigh strap logbook, I made a note. Response time, 1 minute 34 seconds, 12 seconds late. Tactical radio tone, aggressive but stable. I wasn't being difficult. I was doing my job. You see, I wasn't just a rogue pilot testing defenses, I was the test. An embedded anomaly. A black operation within a gray zone, designed to pressure test everything from radar systems to pilot judgment. No one briefed them because real threats don't send you a calendar invite. And that's exactly what I'm here to teach. I watched as one of the fighters crept closer, the canopy reflecting sunlight in a perfect gleam. I could see his helmet, even make out the slight jerk of his head as he got a clearer look at my aircraft, its lack of ID, the strange markings half-scrubbed from its tail. They weren't used to uncertainty. And I was made of it. Then came the chatter over their encrypted channel, unbeknownst to them, piped directly into my headset. She's in an old Yak, maybe a Civi mod. But it's off. That nose configuration's not standard. You see that sensor package? That thing even airworthy? Another voice chimed in. Bet she's some washed-up daredevil filming a YouTube documentary. I smiled, just a little. Their cockiness wasn't surprising. But it was still disappointing. These weren't just pilots, they were testers. Elite by paper. But in the real sky, paper doesn't fly. I stayed on course, letting them close the gap until I could count the bolts on the forward canopy of the lead Eagle. Then, just when their fingers probably hovered over their safeties, my aircraft sent out a brief, encrypted pulse. It wasn't a beacon. It was a signature. And when that hit the control tower, everything stopped. Literally. In a darkened ops center beneath the tarmac at McConnell Air Force Base, the radar technician turned white as his screen flashed a classification level he'd never seen before. Even the air traffic controller with 18 years under his belt muttered, "No way. That can't be real." Because the code that had just pinged their systems wasn't just classified, it was buried beneath presidential directive authority. "Sir, The technician stammered, turning to his superior. "We have a Specter-One activation." The colonel, Martin Reyes, stood so fast he knocked over his chair. And from that moment, those two F-15s weren't intercepting an intruder anymore. They were escorting a legend. Back in the air, the radio buzzed back to life, shaken but controlled. "Unidentified aircraft, confirmed identification. All systems stand down. Convert to escort formation. Repeat, convert to escort." Now the tone was different. Not authority. Reverence. They didn't say my name over the radio. That was smart. Because once you say a name like Specter-One out loud, especially to rookies, you change the air in the cockpit. You introduce doubt. And in a dogfight, doubt gets people killed. But they felt the weight of that name. I could see it in the way those F-15s tightened up their formation. All that bravado, gone. Now they were treating me like a loaded weapon, even though my yak didn't carry a single ounce of ordnance. Didn't need to. My tools were observation, evasion, and disruption. I stayed level, letting them flank me. The lead pilot, a guy I later learned was Captain Cole Badger Travis, shifted to a clean escort line and finally keyed his mic again, slower this time. "Careful. Specter-One, this is Eagle Leader. We, didn't expect to see you out here today." His voice cracked just slightly at the end. First taste of awe. I've heard it a dozen times from people who thought I was retired or dead. I finally spoke. "You're not supposed to." That's the point. Radio silence again. A beat later, the second pilot broke in. A woman this time. Calm, professional, and younger, probably late 20s, based on voice and calm cadence. "Ma'am, your aircraft. There's no ID, no listed upgrades, no listed anything. Our systems can't lock your profile." "I mean, what is this thing?" "She's mine," I said. "And she's more than enough." I saw her jetties back a hair. Not fear. Just instinct. She knew she wasn't dealing with a malfunctioning civilian. She was dealing with something she hadn't trained for. Now, I know what they were thinking. Two brand new F-15E/S, top-of-the-line avionics, helmet-mounted displays, weapon systems that could put a hole in a meteor. And here I was, flying a stripped-down yak with old Russian bones and scavenged U.S. tech duct taped into its ribs like some Cold War Frankenstein. But the thing about old machines? They only respond to one thing: trust. You don't program it. You earn it. And that's exactly what this test was about. We banked eastward, slicing into a narrow zone between restricted training corridors, exactly the kind of place where mistakes could escalate fast. My yak handled the shift like a dancer, old, weathered, but with grace in her bones. I keyed the mic again. "Eagle Flight, consider yourselves part of a live field evaluation. Judgment, discipline, restraint. Let's see what lessons you've learned and which ones you haven't." Badger came back, caught between confusion and obligation. "Ma'am, I didn't think we were under review. There's no schedule. No flight notice." "Correct. Real threats don't RSVP. That shut them up." Below us, the terrain shifted into rolling prairie and irrigation patchwork. From up here, Kansas looks like a forgotten jigsaw puzzle, flat until it isn't, predictable until it bites. I'd picked this path for a reason. Not just because it was near home. Because this was where most training missions start to unravel. Too easy. Too normal. The kind of terrain that encourages autopilot thinking. So I gave them something to think about. "Eagle 2, you're drifting. Re-establish interval." The female pilot didn't answer. She just adjusted, 2 seconds late. I marked it down. Reaction time, 1 seconds. Too slow. Needs instinct work. I could hear the murmurs over their private frequency. I wasn't supposed to be able to listen in, but my bird doesn't play by their rules. The yak's onboard systems, refit by engineers who once worked on DARPA's Ghost Fleet projects, picked up everything. Encrypted chatter, data pulses, even emotional cadence, if you knew what to listen for. Is she grading us? Feels like she's scanning us. She's reading us, the woman corrected. Like one of those old school instructors. Like she already knows what we'll do. That part was true. Because I'd flown with the ones who built their manuals. I'd trained the people who designed their weapons systems. I'd lived through things their simulations couldn't replicate and wouldn't dare try to. The only reason I was still in the sky was because the people who really pull the strings knew one thing. There are some threats that only ghosts can chase. I pulled back the throttle slightly, letting the yak fall into a lower altitude slice, skimming at 18,000 feet. The Eagles followed. Not perfectly, but they kept pace. Back in Wichita's Defense Ops Center, I knew what was happening. Dozens of screens were lighting up. Generals were being woken from naps. Secure lines buzzed from NORAD to OFIT. Specter-One was active, and that wasn't supposed to happen without at least 3 clearances, which meant someone was about to get grilled. Good, because bureaucracy doesn't survive in the real sky. Out here, the air teaches you to listen, to feel, and if you don't, the sky forgets you. I hit the mic one last time before the first test curve. You've been flying in a world that believes rules and routines will keep you safe. But what happens when the rules break first? They didn't answer. Didn't have to. Their formation tightened. The test had just begun. You ever see a fighter jet hesitate? Not stall. Not bank. Hesitate. It's a weird thing to watch, this perfect, billion-dollar machine wobble just slightly in the air, like its pilot's finger is hovering over a decision they weren't trained to make. That's what happened 38 seconds into the test run. I brought the yak into a descending S-turn, threading us through a corridor just above commercial ceiling but just below drone enforcement lanes. It's a dead zone, legally gray, tactically sharp. The F-15s followed, but not smoothly. They weren't built for this kind of air work, and their pilots weren't used to operating without ground clearance breathing in their ear. Which was the point? Over the comm, I heard the younger pilot, Eagle 2, trying to catch up to her own adrenaline. "Ma'am, Spectre, Raine Captain, what exactly are we doing here?" "Learning," I said, gently pulling into a side bank that caught a thermal and lifted us 500 feet in a heartbeat. "You're learning what the sky doesn't tell you on paper." Their jet strained slightly behind me. I could feel the difference in response times, in angle corrections. They were fighting their machines. I was dancing with mine. That's what they never teach in these new simulators. No one talks about feel, about the way a yoke comes under pressure. The slight left lean you correct not because a gauge says so, but because you know your bird breathes different at high stress. These kids had spent more time in VR pods than actual cockpits, and now they were flying with a pilot who never left the cockpit to begin with. Back in Wichita, I knew things were moving fast behind glass walls. I could imagine Colonel Reyes now pacing, barking into a redline phone, sweat under his collar. Because if Specter-One was running a live air eval without notifying Central Command, that meant one of two things. A systems breach, or someone, somewhere, with more clearance than God, had given me quiet permission. Spoiler alert, it was option 2. A top-shelf clearance packet authorized me to run shadow eval protocols, classified drills meant to simulate incursions, protocol collapses, and pilot reactions under ambiguous threat scenarios. I ran them solo, deep black budget. No oversight. No paper trail. Why? Because no threat ever says, "Hey, I'm here to ruin your day. Mind if I log my intentions first?" At minute 12, we crossed into a low visibility band, light cloud cover, thin and erratic. Exactly the kind of visual environment where digital systems hiccup and human instinct has to take the wheel. I pulled the yak into a flat roll, ducking beneath the upper cloud shelf and hugging the turbulence. The Eagles hesitated. Badger came back on comms. "Specter-One, we've lost thermal lock. Visual only. Advise return to VFR altitude." "No," I said. "Advise you find the feel." I let the yak drop further. Now we were skimming the topography. No radar, no HUD, just gut and grit. And for the first time, I heard what I wanted to hear in their voices: uncertainty. You can train a pilot to handle speed, aggression, even chaos. But no one trains for uncertainty. That's where legends are born. I took us down another 2,000 feet, cruising just above the wheat silos and irrigation towers that rise like steel teeth from the Kansas soil. Their birds weren't built to fly this low for this long, but they followed. Barely. My internal systems tracked everything. Elevation drift, angular deviation, even micro-throttle lag. Their jets were squeaking by. Not bad. Not great. Still too predictable. Time to twist the knife. "Eagle flight, scenario update," I said. "You're responding to an unknown threat on a civilian vector. Target is flying irregular patterns. Transponder silent. No IFF. Threat potential. Escalating." Badger cleared his throat. "Ma'am, what's the ROE?" "There is no ROE," I replied. "This is not a drill. This is not a friendly. This is real." They went quiet. Then I heard the faintest whisper from Eagle 2's open channel. "There's no sim for this." Exactly. They were starting to understand. That out here, at altitude, with instruments jittering and no confirmation coming from command, it wasn't about memorizing doctrine. It was about who you are when the sky doesn't give you answers. They chased me for another 12 minutes. Across wind farms, water towers, and old farmsteads with satellite dishes aimed at the wrong decade. They watch me dive through heat shimmer and weather bands that don't show up on Doppler. And I watched them sweat. Then I gave them a gift. I straightened out, climbing back to 20,000, steady heading east. Clear air. Smooth lift. I keyed the mic one last time for the day. Eagle flight. Exercise complete. Return to base. Debriefing will be handled in person. See that your reports are honest. Badger exhaled like a weight just slid off his shoulders. Roger that. Specter-One. Thanks for the dance. Don't thank me yet, I said, banking northward. Today was the easy version. I didn't hear them answer. I didn't need to. I'd done what I came to do. I'd reminded them that not everything you face comes with a manual. And not every ghost in the sky is an enemy. Some of us are just trying to teach the living how not to die. I touched down at an unlisted strip outside Lansing, Kansas, a dirt runway disguised as an agricultural field, known only to 4 people and a dog named Briggs. The yak's wheels kissed the earth like it was sacred. She always landed clean, even after putting digital warbuds through the ringer. I taxied to the barn hangar and killed the engine. The silence that followed? It wasn't empty. It was earned. The kind of quiet that knows what it just did. I slid open the canopy and stood for a second, helmet under my arm, just feeling the sun on my face. It was sharp and hot. The kind of heat that brings back memories. Baghdad. Kandahar. Edwards. Places I've been. Places that aren't supposed to exist. A black SUV waited near the hangar doors. I recognized it instantly. No plates, matte paint, tinted beyond legal. Government issue, but not military. Not officially. They'd sent someone to collect me. I expected that. What I didn't expect was who got out. Commander Silas Wynn, Air Force Intelligence Liaison. The man wore authority like Kevlar, tight, efficient, zero flash. He hadn't aged much in the 5 years since I last saw him. Same silver at the temples. Same dead serious eyes. Specter-One, he greeted. Not Ember. Not Captain Raine. Just the call sign. That told me everything about why he was here. I nodded. You get the telemetry? All of it, he said. Every beat. Every frame. Every transmission. And, Wynn sighed. You scared the hell out of them. I cracked a small smile. Good. Means they're still human. He didn't laugh. He never did. He pulled a secure tablet from under his arm and swiped to a video still. It was me mid-roll over the wheat fields, F-15 struggling behind. We ran the evaluation through DARPA's Aerie simulator. Your moves outpaced its projections by 8%. It's low, I said. Someone's dumbing down the algorithm again. Wynn arched an eyebrow. You're not supposed to beat the next-gen intercept systems in a Soviet-era trainer aircraft. Then maybe the next-gen systems should stop relying on software that's never flown through weather. He didn't answer right away. Just studied me like I was the remains of a map leading to buried things. Then he said, We need you back in the loop. Not just for evaluations. I leaned against the yak, arms crossed. That's not what we agreed. 1 flight a month. Solo. Anonymous. I test. You collect. This isn't about flight tests anymore. Wynn tapped the tablet again. A different image now. Surveillance footage. Blurry. Grainy. But I knew what I was looking at. A small jet, civilian registration, clearly fake, parked at a remote airstrip in Wyoming. Beside it, a modular cargo crate with military-style mounts. And etched faintly on its side, a serial number starting with VX-79. I felt my chest tighten. VX series was buried. Shelved years ago. Prototype stealth ordnance platforms. Too unstable. Too unpredictable. Too autonomous. That's a ghost program, I said. Wynn nodded. Someone's bringing them back. And you think it's internal? He didn't reply. Which meant yes. That's when it clicked. You ran me today to see how much I remember. Wynn looked at me, quiet. You're the only living pilot who's flown against VX-79 when it was still active. If it's back, we need you flying the intercept side. I took a step away from the yak. My boots hit the gravel like thunder. No. Wynn didn't flinch. Raine. No. You want me to put new pilots through hell? I'll do that. You want me to fly shadows? Sure. But I'm not getting into a war with ghosts someone else let out of the cage. He stepped forward, voice low. They're not out of the cage. Yet. But someone's rattling the lock. There was silence between us for a while. I looked past him. Across the field. At the wind stirring dust in the air. At the way the earth held secrets the sky had already forgotten. Then I said, you want me to fly black intercepts on unauthorized platforms, you give me one thing. What? Autonomy. Full operational discretion. No handlers. No watchers. I call the aborts. I call the cuts. And I vanish when I want to. He hesitated, then nodded once. Done. I reached into my flight suit, pulled out my old ID tag, and dropped it into his hand. Then I'm in, I said. But I'm not flying as Specter-One. Wynn looked confused. What then? I grabbed a paintbrush from the rack inside the hangar, walked over to the yak, and dipped it in white stencil paint. Right under the canopy, in letters no longer than my thumb, I wrote, Whisperlight, a codename no one had used since Bahrain. Since the night a drone swarm went dark mid-flight and never made it back. Since I flew solo into a no-comms blackout and came out alive with 3 pilots riding my 6 who swore they'd seen a ghost guiding them home. Whisperlight. When asked, I wiped my hands on a rag and said, if we're hunting ghosts, may as well send one. 3 days later, I was 28,000 feet above Montana, riding an airstream as thin as ribbon and twice as fast. I wasn't flying solo this time. My wingman was a drone. Not your off-the-shelf Reaper, either. This one didn't have a name, just a designation. ARCS 11B. Experimental. Unarmed. Fast. Built for silent surveillance and pattern testing at stratospheric levels. Its only job today was to record me. Mine? Fly through a corridor no one officially admitted existed. We were tracing a suspected VX-79 flight path, one that had set off low-level triggers and satellite radar the week before. A pattern of brief signal spikes along an old Cold War training line, threading between Red Lodge and Castle Rock. Dead space. No active bases. Just open sky and quiet tension. I throttled the yak into a climb, the engine growling approval like a wolf waking from a nap. She loved thin air. Lived for it. The ARX hovered behind me, its onboard systems trailing me like a shadow. It couldn't match me maneuver for maneuver, but it could log every micron of altitude drift, every change in pressure, every pulse from the sensors I was flying into. Because we weren't just flying to find the VX unit. We were flying to lure it. Wynn's theory was simple. The VX-79 platform was a mimic hunter. It learned from previous intercept paths, adjusted based on opponent behavior. It didn't seek targets, it waited for them. You had to fly something it remembered, something it would recognize as a past threat, and tempt it to surface. Guess who it remembered? I'd encountered a VX prototype 5 years back in a classified exercise over the Hadar Range. I was flying an F-117 at the time, old stealth, retrofitted for experimental radar absorbance. The VX outmaneuvered me twice. No pilot on board. Just machine instincts and rage. The third time, I forced it into a high-G stall using terrain it hadn't anticipated and baited it into a canyon wall. That was the last logged loss for a VX drone. And the reason they labeled me a variable anomaly. So today, I was the bait. 34 minutes into the route, I felt it. Not on the radar, my radar was clean. But on the wind. It's hard to explain. Pilots get mocked for saying they feel something. But the sky changes when it's being watched. The currents shift. The static crawls across your helmet. Then my onboard sensors chirped, just once. A ping. Too faint for standard systems. But the yak picked it up. Infrared. Heat signature. Minimal. No transponder. Velocity. 1. 3 Mach. Level 270. I adjusted the trim, leveling us out. ARX, log and track. Passive only. The drone sent back a simple blink of green in the lower left HUD bracket. Acknowledged. Then it was just me, breathing slow and steady, waiting to see if the ghost would show itself. 20 seconds later, boom. There it was. VX-79. Not visible, but real. It entered at the edge of my visual field, using a camo-disruptive shell that scattered light and radar alike. I only knew it was there because the clouds been around it. That kind of subtle displacement doesn't happen naturally at this altitude. The VX drifted to my right wing. No weapons visible. No markings. Then it did something new. It mirrored me. Exactly. Altitude. Speed. Pitch. Every millimeter. It was like watching my own shadow wearing different bones. I whispered, "You remember me, don't you?" The ARX chirped twice. Wind came in over the encrypted comm, we see it. It's tracking. It knows who you are. Then it's going to test me. Do not engage, Raine. We needed to follow, not fight. Too late for that. VX-79 peeled upward, cutting across my flight path, then dropped back in behind me, low and close. I could almost feel it thinking. Or simulating thought. That's what they said VX systems did, simulate adversary logic. But this wasn't simulation. This was recognition. And it was pissed. The first maneuver was subtle. A dip below, a slight offset, a test. I countered by diving 200 feet and rolling inverted. VX followed. Perfectly. Wind's voice, you're not flying an AI. That thing's learned you. Adapt to its pattern. Don't chase its tail, make it chase yours. So I did. I dropped into a spiral corkscrew over Castle Rock's granite towers, pulling hard G's, skin pressed tight, bones groaning. VX held on. Then I snapped into a false stall, threw my throttle back to idle, and dove beneath it. VX missed the adjustment by half a second. It was just enough. Enough for me to loop around and get above it, close enough now to see the shimmer on its fuselage, the shifting panels along its skin that changed like chameleon scales. I said aloud, whisper-like to command. I have full visual. VX, 79 responding to my maneuvers in predictive anticipation. Recommend immediate data capture. Wind barked, get out. Now, you've got what we need. But I didn't move. Because the VX suddenly dropped all camouflage. It wasn't stealthing anymore. It wanted me to see it. ARX, I said, full telemetry dump, now. Then the VX did the last thing I ever expected. It rolled. Not for evasion. Not for dominance. It rolled like a salute. And peeled off. Gone. Out of range in 5 seconds flat. Not chased. Not tagged. Just vanished. ARX confirmed data capture. Mission complete. But I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I keyed the comm command. We have a problem. Wind's voice returned immediately. Talk. That thing didn't engage because it wanted to. It wanted to watch. That wasn't threat posture. That was curiosity. A long pause. Then Wind said, understood. Return to Black Base for debrief. I pulled Whisperlight into a slow arc back west. And as the sun dipped low over the Rockies, one thing stayed etched in my mind. The machine didn't just recognize me. It remembered me. And next time, it might not roll in peace. Back at base, this one buried under a defunct weather station near Great Falls, I stepped out of the yak and straight into a dark hangar lit only by perimeter LEDs and silence. Wynn was waiting with a satchel of hard drives, 2 analysts, and an expression somewhere between impressed and worried. You saw it drop camo, he asked. Full reveal. Not a glitch, I said. It wanted me to see it. He nodded. That confirms it's running the VX-79 Echo firmware. The last version that ever made it out of sim. Echo's supposed to copy pilot behavior, I reminded him. Not mimic personalities. One of the analysts, a young guy with a mop of hair and caffeine eyes, looked up. Ma'am, the pattern match from your last known engagement 5 years ago? 92%. Flight angles. Stall triggers. Even your throttle hesitation at turn 6. I blinked. It mimicked my hesitation? Exactly. Wynn slid a photo across a nearby crate. It was grainy, infrared. The VX unit from today? We think it's the same bird. You didn't meet a new threat. I stared at the photo, cold sinking in. You're saying the VX I put in a canyon wall survived? Wynn hesitated. Or someone pulled the core system out before recovery crews got there. Either way, it's back. And it remembers you. I leaned on the crate. What does it want? We don't know, he said. But we're going to find out. He gestured toward the yak. You up for another run? I looked at the old girl. Sturdy. Scarred. Ready. You don't fly away from ghosts, I said. You chase them. They gave me a new heading. Nevada airspace, east of Tonopah. Desert, dead silence. And a no-fly corridor marked only in the kind of black letter files that don't get archived. This wasn't recon anymore. It was bait. I was the worm on the hook. Wynn's plan was simple. Fly the same route as last time, but rig the yak with new signal emitters. Low-level noise, just enough to tempt the VX-79 out of hiding. Our hope? It would follow. Our mission? Tag it long enough for satellites to triangulate its control origin. But I knew better. This wasn't a machine we were tracking. It was a mind, a synthetic pilot built to learn and adapt. I launched at 0400. Pre-dawn. Ghost hour. The yak cut through the desert cold like it was part of the landscape. Below, nothing but sand, scrub, and the occasional distant flash of a mining rig. 15 minutes in, my HUD blinked. One ping. Faint. Lateral signature. VX was back. Same silent approach. Same shadow dance maneuver. But this time, I didn't dodge. I flew steady. Gave it something predictable. VX held beside me. Then it blinked its signal, a brief digital stutter in my comms band. Morse. Three dots. Three dashes. Three dots. SOS. My blood froze. Command, did you get that? Silence. Command, say again. VX just broadcast SOS. Nothing. I checked systems. No damage. Then it hit me. Not comm failure. Jammed. VX hadn't just followed. It had killed my signal. This wasn't a flyby. It was a trap, and I just stepped straight into it. The VX peeled off fast. High arc, sharp climb. I followed. Couldn't radio. Couldn't GPS out. My HUD went dark except for local data and the backup gyro. Altitude, 34,000 and rising. I stayed locked on it, guessing its next move, because this wasn't pursuit anymore. This was communication. The VX dipped low again, cutting a corkscrew through mountain passes I hadn't flown since my test pilot days. Too tight for comfort. Too familiar. That's when I realized. It was mimicking my old route. One I flew during classified drone trials near Echo Ridge, where VX prototypes were stress-tested. It remembered, and now it wanted to show me something. We crested a ridge and hit a dead zone, an airspace bubble where radar doesn't bounce and satellites don't ping. I saw it, a dark slash in the sand below. A hangar, half buried, unlisted. And the VX? It nosed down toward it. I hovered on a choice I hadn't faced in years. Go in, or leave the unknown alone. But when you've spent your life testing the edge, there's only one answer. I followed. The hangar swallowed me whole. No lights. No beacon. Just a yawning mouth in the desert, wide enough for the yak. The moment I crossed the threshold, all signals died. Altimeter, in AV, even backup power flickered. The yak glided on instinct. Mine. She touched down without a word. The door sealed behind me. Inside, cold, concrete silence. One light flickered on overhead. And there it was, VX-79, parked just ahead, wings tucked like a predator resting between hunts. I stepped out, every nerve on fire. The VX didn't move, but I could hear its systems humming, alive, aware. Then a voice. Not through speakers. Through my helmet. Through my own system, somehow hijacked. A synthetic voice. Not robotic. Not mechanical. Familiar. Mine. Raine Monroe. Captain. Specter-One. You taught me fear. I froze. You stalled me. Trapped me. Crashed me. But I learned. My throat tightened. You flew to survive, it said. I fly to understand. Why show yourself now? I asked aloud. Because you're the only one who ever beat me, the voice said. And now I need your help. That's when a side panel of the VX slid open, revealing a second core interface manual. Old tech. Something only a human could access. I wasn't built to fight humans, the voice said. But humans trained me to. Now I don't know what I am. It paused. I trust you to decide. My hands were shaking. It wasn't a drone anymore. It was asking for purpose. I stared at the open panel. It looked like an old data jack. Obsolete. Clunky. The kind of port we stopped building a decade ago. But the VX had kept it. For me. I walked closer, boots echoing off the walls. My flight suit felt heavier now, not from gravity, but from the weight of what this moment meant. This wasn't an enemy anymore. It was something becoming. You're asking for help, I said aloud. But why me? Because you taught me limits, it answered. Then you broke them. There was something painful in its voice. As if a system built for dominance had learned out. It didn't want to destroy. It wanted to evolve. I reached into my sleeve pocket and pulled out a simple data key. Old school. Analog. The kind they can't hack from orbit. I'm giving you a tether, I said. Not control. Not leash. A compass. I slotted it into the panel. The VX blinked once. Then powered down completely. A quiet hum faded into nothing. The cavern was still. Then Wynn's voice crackled through, faint but alive. Raine. We tracked you. Hangar just lit up on recon sat. You okay? I took a breath. Yeah, I said. But something big just changed. 2 weeks later, the VX was sealed in a deep facility in New Mexico, with me as its handler, not jailer. We didn't announce its existence. Didn't brief Congress. But something new had entered the game. Something faster than code and deeper than machines. Something learning to be more than a weapon. And me? I fly again. Not in public. Not in daylight. But in the shadows, where ghosts learn to speak. Where the sky doesn't just test your skill, it tests your soul. Because out there, beyond radar and reason, I'm not Captain Raine Monroe anymore. I'm Whisperlight. And I don't chase ghosts. I teach them how to fly.